Am I the only one that has really violent, intrusive thoughts? Like, I was tying my shoe before I went into work the other day, and I was like, oh my God, what if something like a satellite fell from the sky and crushed the majority of my car, but like missed me by inches? And I was like, I would probably start my podcast then. And then my immediate thought was, hey, let's not wait for a near-death experience to make us do something that we feel called to do. So here the fuck we are. This podcast is for anyone who is in the process of becoming. I hope that whoever is meant to hear what I have to say is listening. But as always, all the cunts to the front. The first thing I usually want to know when I start a podcast is like, who the fuck is this and why the fuck am I listening? So I'm going to cover that right here. I'm Carmen Renee Flores. I am Latina. I'm queer. I'm LA based, but born in the Midwest. So I grew up quite literally standing out. I was one of maybe 4 brown students in my high school. It did not help that I was weird, boisterous, eccentric. As a matter of fact, my first grade teacher, shout out Mrs. Simpson, love you, warned my parents that my second grade teacher would want me medicated. She was right. My second grade teacher absolutely wanted me medicated because she just didn't want to deal with a kid who wanted to, I don't know, talk a lot and had a lot of energy. Weird. She thought I had ADD. Lo and behold, she might have been right. I might need to be diagnosed with that as an adult. Like I was diagnosed with depression when I was in an abusive relationship that I didn't know I was in at the time. More on that later. I've been dubbed weird my entire life. And with quite a lot of reflection and journaling, I kind of realized I felt really lonely growing up. And it took me until my 30s to realize something. And there's this passage on exile in Women Who Run with the Wolves that I think perfectly encompasses why that happened. And it goes like this. If you have attempted to fit whatever mold and failed to do, you are probably lucky. You may be an exile of some sort, but you have sheltered your soul. There is an odd phenomenon that occurs when one keeps trying to fit and fails. Even though the outcast is driven away, she is at the same time driven right into the arms of her psychic and true kin, whether these be course study, an art form, or a group of people. It is worse to stay where one does not belong at all than to wander about lost for a while looking for the psychic and soulful kinship one requires. It is never a mistake to search for what one requires. Never. So the question comes into my mind like, Carmen, there's over 4 million podcasts in the world. What do you think you're going to do? You think you're going to make a difference? Listen, what I know is that I don't know anything, but I want to learn everything I can get my ravenous claws into. And I want to share what I learn along with what I know. Dripping water breaks boulders, and I will proudly be those singular drops every single week in hopes that I make a difference in somebody else's life and my own. I'm a woman becoming. I'm a woman in search of who I am meant to be, and I'm listening and leaning into the curiosities of my spirit, and I just want to encourage people to do that alongside me. I was put on this earth to love, and I love sharing what I learn. I'm in search of my wildness. And part of that came with naming this podcast. It started off with like, I called my friend Krista because she was being a smartass, and I was just like, you beautiful cunt. And she was like, you should name your podcast that. I was like, no, I don't know, maybe something like that. And then I was playing with like, my girlfriend and I were talking about claiming the word, like reclaiming the word cunt and making it like a positive, right? So like cunts of the world and like all the cunts of the front and like, oh, that's cunty, like cunts only, stuff like that. So those were just like little nuggets in the back of my mind, and I was going through everything. And then I was like, maybe I'll play like, I'll spell it out with my name, like Carmen's Unfiltered Normality, but like tea, like you got some tea to spell. And then I remembered, the way she said it and we were talking about it, it was like, ooh, that sounds good. And when like my conscious mind was like, everyone in my family over the age of 50 probably will hate this. But in my feeling and in like my wild subconscious like woman mind inside me, I was like, yes. Like, all the cunts to the front. Immediately, yes. And then when I told my girlfriend what I chose, she was like, yeah, like all the girls to the front. And I was like, yeah, all the girls to the front. And she was like, no, like the feminist movement. And I was like, no, I don't know about that. What is that? Now, okay. So the saying is directly linked to the Riot Grrrl movement, the feminist punk rock movement of the early 90s. I'm going to be honest and call myself out here. I did not know about it. I didn't know about it. You don't know what you don't know until you know, right? And I would have loved to have been exposed to this. But you see, if it was like in the early 90s and in 93, I was 2 years old. I grew up Catholic in a small, straight white town in the country in the Midwest. Like, I just was not exposed to this. And I wish to God I would have been. So the movement was quite literally born out of necessity. These like punk rock scenes where women and girls wanted to have a place at were not welcome and quite literally were not safe environments. They were assaulted, they were physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, in many ways couldn't take up space. Then you have the amazing pioneers of the Riot Grrrl movement. You have Bikini Kill, L7, Slits, Huggy Bear. There's so many more, but they moved that movement forward. Like, they made it happen. And it was Kathleen Hanna who started saying, all the girls to the front, I'm not kidding, we're going to take up space, you're going to be right here, and you're going to be safe. And there's this one clip I love that I found of her that it was like, I have a right to be hostile if someone's boot is on my fucking neck. And I was like, oh my God, that just encompasses everything. Like, it was such a strong and simple statement that meant so fucking much. Honestly, when I dug into it, I got excited and angry all at the same time. Like, it reminded me of when I was at a bar and I was wearing a skirt and my hands were full and this disgusting fat guy pushed up against me, put his hand up my skirt to feel my ass. I got angry. I followed him. I told the security and the security kicked me out. There was another time that I was probably like one of 2 or 3 girls in this huge jujitsu class of like, I don't know, 20-some guys. And you'd have rolling partners. And there was this one dude, probably 3.5 times my size. And he was a higher belt. So when you're with a higher belt, I'm like a white belt, you're supposed to teach, right? Like, you're like, here's what you do. Here's how you do a lock. Here's how you do whatever. This dude just flopped on top of me for 10 minutes, however long we were rolling for, just to show me that like he was stronger, that he like had control. He didn't teach me shit. I was so pissed off. I didn't want to go back. I don't want to go back to that place actually, because it was just like, you don't get it, man. Like, you don't do that. That's just not what you do. And on the flip side, some feelings that came out when I was looking into this like entire Riot Grrrl movement. Like, I thought about the first time that I rolled with the guy that was actually a white belt like me, a little bit bigger than me, and I got him to tap out. He didn't want to roll with me after that. It took me until the second half of my 20s to start really practicing saying no when I meant it and not staying around people who didn't value my presence and practicing speaking like my truth. And I mentioned loneliness earlier with intention, because sometimes when you evolve and change, sometimes the people around you do support you, encourage you, and celebrate you. And that's like the dream, right? But sometimes you may be ostracized. They may go away. They don't like this different person that you have become, even though you're becoming better for yourself. But you know what? Even though my feelings were hurt when I started changing for the better, but people were like judging me for it, I started feeling more free. I started feeling ease of living. I started feeling happy every day, not all day. Like, human life is what it is, right? I'm not where I want to be right now. I'm in right now in my studio apartment that is extremely small. I'm on the floor shooting this right now. I have seen a cockroach in the last year. I found out what a flea infestation was like a year ago when I didn't know feral animals were sleeping on my patio that I go in and out of all the time. And they're very first world problems, right? Like, I'm a single income household. I am in the first 3 years of my social media consulting business. And it's contracting. It's not consistent. Like, I work at a restaurant. I just got a second W-2 job, but I feel peaceful and excited about what's coming, even though I have no idea what it is. I don't think you will ever be called to do something that is not meant for you. If it calls to you, then it means you're capable of doing it. This podcast is for listening to the curiosities of our spirit. And I want to nudge people to listen to theirs and take action on them. It's a space for exploration. It's a space for growth and embracing who we're meant to become. Good shit happens when you listen to yourself, when like your inner voice, and you take a little action every day or a little action every week. Like I am starting to attract people into my life that are like-minded, that are high vibrational, that are up to things and have really good energy. I am not making all the money in the world yet, and yet is a very important word in my vocabulary right now. But I know that like already new opportunities are starting to show themselves to me. Now to give you a little bit of perspective, I'm going to tell you what happened to me when I didn't listen to my intuition and those little whispers that say, hey, don't do that. Not only did I not come out until I was 29, but I used to kind of happen into relationships. And even when I wasn't overjoyed to be in them, it was just like, oh, dating, we like each other, they're nice, it's good enough. We'll just like, okay, this turned into a 2-year relationship. And I got into an abusive relationship. And it didn't happen like just like that. Like I didn't know what I didn't know. I did not know about predatory behavior. I didn't know or understand what love bombing was. I did not understand that someone could hide who they really were, their true character, for up to a year and, you know, mask and then finally rip that motherfucker off. And you're like, oh shit, that's nope, don't want that. I did not know how things could slowly build and change, how like small interruptions could lead to trying to control you and emotional manipulation. And it led to being angry when I tried to just be me or be pretty. And I experienced violence in the home, like things were thrown around, holes were punched in walls, doors were broken and ripped off their hinges. It was absolutely ridiculous, but I got slowly, again, very teeny tiny, slowly, small behaviors became bigger, and you adapt and you don't realize what you're adapting to. And I shared some of this online, and this commenter, a man, was like, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you leave immediately? Let me tell you something. This shit doesn't all happen at once when you meet someone and then you're like, oh yes, I would like to stay with an abusive person. Like it doesn't. It happens slowly over time. You're kind of groomed into it, and my instincts were injured. I didn't know what I didn't know. There's a passage from Women Who Run with the Wolves about this. I'm going to read it right now. When the instincts are injured, humans will normalize assault after assault, acts of injustice and destruction toward themselves, their offspring, their loved ones, their land, and even their gods. Now I'm going to share a study that was done on dogs that was shared in the book, but I do want to say, like, I'm vegan. I don't believe in testing anything on animals. This happened before I was born, but I do think it is irrelevant, and it really gave me some perspective. So I'm going to share. There are 4 different tests done on these animals in cages. First, there would be a shockboard rigged on half of the bottom of the cage. They started with the left half. They would rig it to randomly shock, and then the animal would figure it out, go to the other half of the cage where it was safe, and would lay down and be calm. The second test, they did the random shocking on the opposite side of the cage, and then the animal would figure out, okay, go to the other side to be safe from shocks. The third test, they randomly shocked the entire floor of this cage, which is horrible, I know, but they would randomly shock the entire floor of this cage. And at first the dog would try to get out. The dog would try to get away from the being harmed. And eventually the dog just adapted to the pain, just adapted to the random shocks and laid down and became docile. Now, the creepiest part is the 4th test they did. They opened the cage. They still had the entire bottom of the cage rigged to give random shocks. And what they found is that the animal was so adapted to what had already happened to it that even though it had a chance to be free in previous tests that would try to get out of the cage or free itself, it had become so adapted to what was happening that it did not try to get free. It did not try to leave. It just laid down and stayed. And this quote from the book made me just want to hug the version of myself that was in that relationship. It goes like this. The instinct to flee or to fight is weakened, and they are victimized. Conversely, a woman in her right wildish mind rejects convention when it is neither nutritious or sensible. I have never identified with like labeling myself as like a survivor. I do think that that period in my life was a catalyst to change, and it became ever important to me to listen to my intuition because she's always right. She has always been right. And by listening bit by bit over time, I have become more decisive. I feel like I'm unfuckwithable. I feel sure-footed, even though I have no idea what the fuck is going to happen next. I feel like I've started to attract more high vibrational beings, like I said, and that's what has started to happen as a result of just like listening to my intuition, of listening to our intuition. I think good shit can happen. I'm going to talk a lot about healing from shit. And to be clear, like I want it on the record that this whole healing thing ain't a cute journey. It's not so fun. It's ugly sometimes. Growing pains are real. It is painful to lose old versions of yourself and become a completely new person that nobody recognizes. And then in result, you might lose people. It is not the easiest thing to do or endure. And I think I know I'm here to encourage people to surrender to who they're meant to be, because I finally am. So come with me.